Have you ever met someone who seemed invisible? Not because they weren't there, but because they chose to live in the shadows of silence. Someone who went through life avoiding conversations, eye contact, and human touch because they believed they had nothing valuable to offer the world. This is the story of a man named Arvind. And trust me, if you stay with me until the end, you may just see yourself in him, and you may walk away with a question that could change your life. Arvind had always been a quiet boy. Not the kind of quiet that hides mischief, but the kind that builds tall, invisible walls. At school, while children laughed and shared their lunch, Arvind sat in the corner, silently chewing his food. When a teacher asked him to read aloud, his throat clenched so hard that words never came out. And when others tried to befriend him, his eyes darted to the ground as though conversation itself was a frightening battlefield. The years passed, but the wall grew higher. By the time he was 25, Arvind was a man of routines, not relationships. He worked in a small office cubicle, did his tasks with precision, and retreated home every evening to the company of his books, his music, and the ticking clock on his desk. No laughter filled his home. No phone calls of friends. No messages of "come join us." Because by now, everyone had stopped asking. He wasn't disliked. He wasn't hated. He simply wasn't remembered. And that was the cruelest kind of loneliness, the loneliness of being unseen. Here's the thing about life. It doesn't stop for anyone. Birthdays came and went in the office, people celebrated, shared cake, clicked photos, and Arvind sat at his desk pretending he had no interest. Weddings of colleagues, weekend plans, small holidays, all passed by him like passing trains, each reminding him, "You are not on board. You are standing outside." But the truth was harder to swallow. Arvind wasn't left out. He had left himself out. Now, if you've ever felt this way, on the fringes of gatherings, watching laughter like it's a movie you weren't cast in, then you know how heavy it feels inside. It's not merely sadness. It's the gnawing belief that maybe you don't belong to people at all. And Arvind believed that with all his heart, until one day, something happened. It was raining when Arvind got the news. His old school teacher, the one who once encouraged him despite his silences, had passed away. Reluctantly, Arvind went to the funeral. He expected it to be a dreary affair. Maybe a handful of mourners, a quiet ceremony. After all, she wasn't famous. But what he saw there froze him in place. Dozens of people, friends, neighbors, old students, all gathered together. Some were crying, some were sharing stories, some were laughing through their tears, reciting little anecdotes of the teacher who shaped their lives. Arvind stood in the last row, umbrella dripping, watching something powerful unfold. A life remembered not for achievements, not for wealth, not for fame, but for how one woman touched the hearts of those around her. In that moment, something inside Arvind cracked. He realized, when he dies, no one will gather like this. No one will speak of him, because no one would have known him. And for the first time in years, tears rolled down his face. Not for the teacher's death, but for the life he had refused to live. That night, staring at the stillness of his room, Arvind asked himself a terrifying question. What if the reason I feel invisible is because I made myself invisible? It sent shivers down his spine, but it also planted something new, a seed of possibility. The next morning, Arvind did something strangely small, and yet monumentally different. He greeted his colleague with a smile. Just one word: "Good morning." Now think about it. This was a man who had avoided conversations his entire life. For him, smiling at someone was the social equivalent of climbing a mountain. Did the colleague smile back? But more importantly, Arvind felt alive. He felt the wall tremble, and that was only the beginning. Transformation is never glamorous in its early stages. Don't believe the movies where people change overnight. No, change is awkward. It stutters, it backfires. Arvind found that out quickly, His first attempts at joining conversations often ended with silence and embarrassed nods. He would say a sentence and overthink it for hours. At one birthday party, he tried telling a story and stumbled so badly he excused himself to the washroom, face burning with shame. But here's what made this time different. He didn't retreat back into isolation. He pushed himself again the next day. And the next, and the next, and the next. Because deep inside, that teacher's funeral had taught him a truth he couldn't unlearn. Life is remembered for human connection. Without it, everything else feels hollow. Months passed, and slowly, people started noticing the new Arvind. It wasn't that he suddenly became the life of the party. No. What changed was his willingness to be present, to listen, to ask, to laugh, even if it was quietly. For the first time, co-workers invited him not out of pity, but out of habit. And he said yes. The man who had once hated gatherings found himself enjoying simple walks, casual dinners, shared jokes. Then came the real turning point. One evening, a junior colleague, nervous about a presentation, came to Arvind for help. In the past, he would have avoided it. But this time, he sat with her, guided her, encouraged her. When she later succeeded and publicly thanked him, something unlocked within. Arvind realized connection is not about being perfect. It's about giving yourself your time, your care, your presence. That single realization shifted his entire life. Years later, people who had once walked past Arvind unnoticed now described him as the most approachable man in the office. He became the listener everyone turned to, the friend some had never thought they'd find. His weekends were no longer hollow silences. They were filled with activities, friends, and even community work. He began mentoring young people who felt socially anxious, telling them, "I used to be where you are. I know the prison of silence. But trust me, the key is always in your pocket. You just have to dare to use it." The boy who was once invisible had become unforgettable, not because he was louder, wealthier, or more talented than others, but because he dared to connect. Perhaps, right now as you're listening to this story, you see in Arvind a shadow of yourself. Maybe you've been hiding behind your own walls. Maybe you believe people wouldn't care about you, that your presence doesn't matter. But let me ask you, what if you're wrong? What if, out there, someone is waiting for your smile, your story, your words, your friendship? Human connection is not a luxury. It's the very soul of life. Without it, even success tastes empty. With it, even small days feel meaningful. Arvind's journey is not just his. It is a reminder. The world does not need you to be perfect. It simply needs you to show up. So the next time you hesitate to speak, to greet, to reach out, remember, the first step may feel terrifying, but that step could be the one that tears down your invisible wall and lets the world see you. And, more importantly, lets you see yourself. And now, I want to leave you with a question. When your final day comes, and people gather to speak of you, what stories will they tell? Will there be silence, or will there be laughter, tears, and memories of how you touched their lives? The answer depends on what you choose to do today.